Ed, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Nice to be here, Matt.
Pleasure to make your digital acquaintance. I've been following your journey for some time from afar. We've never met in person, but very interested in the work you do, and I'm very impressed by your creative approach to your newsletters. I find them a combination of uplifting, entertaining, engaging, heartwarming, sometimes challenging, because some of the spiritual topics can sometimes put you into a little bit of a tailspin depending on the state that you're in when you get to them.
Yep.
But I think that's the purpose, right?
Yeah.
So pleasure to have you here. Maybe we could start by just a little bit of a background on sort of who you are, where you come from, and what kind of projects you're working on presently down in the glorious land of Costa Rica.
Yeah, surely. And I know we're going to jump into it's a podcast where a lot of ideas and concepts and heady stuff will come up. So I usually start conversations with asking the person I'm talking to what they're feeling or how they're feeling, and presence myself a little bit and maybe set the context. So I can start, or if you'd like to tell me what you're feeling today.
So I feel today a sense of calm, which is nice because I haven't felt that all week. I've been felt like the front of a plow in terms of it's been very difficult to get centered lately. So I feel blessedly present, which is again nice. And just the right amount of anticipatory, like, ooh, I wonder where this conversation is going to go.
Me too. Awesome. And receiving you fully and feeling that as well today, feeling calm, feeling very full, like I got a good night of sleep. My cup and my energy feel full. It's been a long week, so feel not overwhelmed or busy, feel actually very alive and excited for what's happening. Even though my schedule itself has been full, I feel really excited and connected to life.
So, awesome.
Yeah,
it's great to hear.
Awesome. So to address your question, I guess a little bit of my background story and how I got here today. Yeah, my background is I'm a New Yorker. I had a very different life than I do now. I was a nightclub promoter in college and high school. In high school, I started doing parties for people who are under 21 in the biggest nightclubs in New York, bringing kids from the tri-state area, and closing the bar, obviously, for liquor, and having music and fun. And I think that was a beginning of me realizing my light as a connector and bringing people together. I didn't yet know for what and what I could use that light for, but clubs at the time were the thing. And as I got into college, it started to become too much. My health was not great. I was drinking, partying. There was drugs involved, obviously, in the nightclub scene. And I started to ask myself, what else is out there? What do I want to do? I saw people in my field opening restaurants and things that didn't excite me after they got out of nightlife. And I was also studying economics in college, which became very boring for me. I quickly transitioned into philosophy. And it was at an interesting time in life where my father and my family had transitioned into wellness and longevity, eating organic food, cleaning out our bodies. My father was in a very toxic business with Russia, very profitable, but just killed his health. And essentially, two of the best doctors in New York at the time said that if you continue like this, you could just choose which disease you'll get from a list. Your health markers are horrible. And so he started to do a very long process of detox, green juices, infrared saunas, all these advanced longevity protocols, heavy metal chelation. And I went in for a test and my heavy metals were through the roof.
Mm.
And so I started doing the cleansing and heavy metal detox and other things. I changed my diet, gluten, dairy, and sugar cut. And I couldn't believe how much energy I had. Sure, he's an older guy, but I'm supposed to be a healthy college kid who plays sports and runs. So I didn't realize how important wellness, health was to my life, and how much energy I could have because I didn't know my baseline. I
Right.
was like, yeah, I'm pretty good, but I'm waking up every morning tired. And his journey went more on that side. Mine also started to change to spirituality. I both at the same time started to go on retreats and entrepreneurial gatherings. At the time, it was things like Summit Series and Sandbox and these cool events with people's books who I would read, like Richard Branson. But
Hmm.
they also had a lot of wellness and spiritual teachers. So I started to get excited by connecting to people who were shifting and changing the world, and also meeting healers and practitioners of a lot of spiritual modalities. It was like a buffet at that time for me, just tasting little morsels, energy work, Tai Chi, meditation. And I realized I wanted to shift. I had started to go to Burning Man, and I realized what was possible when people come together, art and community and creativity. I ended up getting a kind of crazy job, like some quasi job with the founders of Burning Man, which was a unique opportunity to see people who started a movement and spend, months with them
Mm.
traveling. And after, when I was in college, I was working at a hedge fund for a little bit because I thought I needed a job. Like, you can't just leave nightclub promoting and be a bum. And I thought it would make my parents happy and me happy, and it would make me rich. And I felt dissonance. And at the same time, I'm like going to Burning Man, and I was like, something feels weird, and I don't even understand what we're doing. Like, an apple is worth $3, and a stock of that apple is worth $7, and we're trading some option worth $12, and something felt totally off. And the hedge fund I was working at ended up blowing up. Had a
Mm.
flash crash. There was a flash crash in the market, and at that same time, my father, I was graduating college as a philosophy major. My dad called it a degree in bullshit at the time. Boy, what are you going to be, a bullshit artist? I was like, no, Dad, but maybe. And, he said to me one day, why don't we do this thing that is like our hobby and our passion, health and wellness, and create a place for this? And I had seen retreat centers and event spaces, and I'm a producer. So I said, man, let's do this. And we looked all over the world for where we could create a space like this that would essentially be part community. So you could live there, and instead of kind of the community center, it would be a health and wellness center with green juices and all the cool stuff, and also be fun. A lot of the wellness centers were super boring. You're like just sitting there kind of drinking these juices. And I saw Burning Man, and I was like, why can't we live with art and the best in sustainability and cool people and inspiring talks, like TED Talk style world? And so we set out to create today what I guess people think are eco villages and retreat centers, but yeah, kind of a new way of living for us and for others. And somehow, after looking based on a pretty serious set of criteria, nature, safety, all these things that mattered to us, Costa Rica became this like jewel in the Americas. We didn't want to travel all the way to Bali. My grandma
Mm.
lives in New York, so I wanted to be able to see her. And we landed on Costa Rica, and it was, like this Switzerland of the Americas, like no army, peaceful, education rates through the roof, the most biodiverse country in the world per square foot.
Wow.
People were amazing. It really started to feel like home. And so probably my last year in college, I think it was somewhere around like 2005 and 2006 time, I came down here for what I thought was a trip, ended up being us renting a condo for a while, looking for land, my dad going back to the US and me kind of having my adventure here. And then a friend asked me like, Ed, when are you coming back? And I was like, yeah, like as soon as this, we get this thing going. I didn't realize like most people kind of make these grand choices and pull the band-aid. And
Hmm.
it seems like you have to take these massive leaps in life, which you do in certain cases. Mine was a gradual leap. It was way out of my comfort zone to live in Latin America after New York, but I just
Yeah, I don't
started.
know if there's two more polar opposite places than
Yeah,
New York City and Costa Rica.
yeah. I'm looking now, and I have like green in front of me and hummingbirds. And I was just in New York, and I'll share later why I think they're kind of similar. Well, I'll share now actually the one part of it that attracted me. Costa Rica was the land bridge of the Americas. Historically, it was the meeting place of the tribes of North and South.
Oh, no kidding.
A little strip of land that was the most important trade route. You had to cross it to get from South America to North America. So it was always a mix and a melting pot of people and
Mm.
cultures and religions and economic backgrounds. And that's what I felt in New York, that I love the diversity of people. And I felt that in Costa Rica too. It was amazing. I would meet people from all over the world, rich, poor, black, white, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, doesn't matter, but with a shared set of values for good living.
So
So,
speaking of
yeah.
Christian, Muslim, Jewish, did you grow up with a strong religion in your household, or did
Oh,
spirituality just hit you when you were in the Burning Man part of your life?
it's a good question. My parents came from the Soviet Union. Now, the part of that union that they came from was Kiev, in the Ukraine. But religion was not practiced. Like if you were a Jew, you kind of had to hide it. And my dad
Mm.
left for some of those reasons, that he felt a lot of oppression, a lot of control. And it's funny, he left to the US and then I left to Costa Rica for smelling some of the same things in the air happening. But I wasn't raised very religious. I went to Hebrew school and got a bar mitzvah. My rabbi said I was Jew-ish, emphasis. um, but you know, one thing that I loved about I guess it was when I was in high school, but growing up, my dad quickly knew that in the school system I wouldn't get a certain kind of education. So he handed me my first books when I was probably in eighth or ninth grade. Deepak Chopra's Seven Spiritual Laws of Success,
Wow.
Tony Robbins books, and a slew of others that became the basis of my spirituality or my philosophy studies on on things that are a bit greater than us. And so I became insanely curious about personal growth, spirituality, religion, mysticism, you name it. All of the things that were in the etheric world were really interesting to me, because yeah, I felt there was more to this life than they were feeding us.
Hmm.
And I felt a connection to spirit, now much deeper, but some people call it God, spirit, higher power. It doesn't matter what you call it, but I just felt that there was something greater that was pulling me.
When you were at the nightclub phase of your life, you mentioned there was a sprinkling of drugs, which I think, most teenagers end up getting themselves into anyway, but certainly
Yeah,
in that scene. How much of that was psychedelic, or was any of it?
yeah. I mean, just to be frank, at the time, it was mostly things like MDMA,
Yeah.
heart openers, things that made us feel good. I wasn't too much into psychedelics. Later on my journey, when I arrived in Costa Rica, now almost 18 years ago, ayahuasca and all of the psychedelics we hear of today, mushrooms, came into my life. The thing was, when I was doing them at a younger age, it was to feel, uh, in a way, I wanted to feel higher or better. I was
Mhm.
striving for something, and I was getting a taste of it with these euphoric experiences of dance and drugs. I didn't know then what I know now, which those states are accessible to us all the time. And then you would come down from those states, and the community that you had at Burning Man wasn't as strong, because the drugs wore off. And so, yeah, I developed a different approach and a different kind of, I would say, relationship to them. My mom made a joke, which was, when I got to Costa Rica, I was like, Mom, it's different now. It's plant medicine. And she was like, boy, you can't fool me. Drugs and just became medicine and ceremony. You just relabeled shit, And I was cracking up. And she was right. Like later, I realized too that a lot of people were turning towards ayahuasca and psychedelics to escape a current reality with no real form of integration, and immediately like, oh man, I want to build an eco village. I want to quit my company. And it's cool if it shakes up your life, but I just see so many people to this date constantly going to ceremony, constantly looking for answers, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I get the impression that people are trying to shortcut the hard part of the work, which is to just stare dead in the eye that you've lived your whole life accumulating negative energy, and the only way to get it out is just a piece at a time, and just slowly letting go and slowly allowing yourself to settle into the reality that we're just surfing something here and you're not in control of anything. So the more you try and cling to it, the shakier the boat's going to feel. It's a pretty wild set of things to suddenly have to conclude. And I think that if you have never had any experience of anything before, and then you go through I haven't done ayahuasca yet, but any type of psychedelic experience where you are imbued with a knowledge that is irrefutable. You just suddenly know things. You can't necessarily even explain it. You just know it.
Yeah.
And now all your maps that you built your whole life no longer make any sense. I don't know that there's anything more disturbing to the human paradigm than the maps that you use to navigate the world. Suddenly you can't trust them. It can be a very unsettling experience. And to your point, you need people who can help you traverse that path. Otherwise you can end up in the loony bin.
Yeah, and I'm just so I stated, I'm not against plant medicine or psychedelics. I just speak out a little more directly about it because everyone is drinking the Kool-Aid and talking about it like the revolution. I do know a few places in Costa Rica that, there's PhD doctors and psychiatrists who can help integrate, and also very deep indigenous people who are leading the journeys. And so there's both that marriage of spirit and indigenous wisdom and modern science to help integrate what's happening with the psyche. So yeah, definitely not against it, just really cautious about how people do it, because I didn't have that when I was around. And it both jarred me and supported me during my dark night of the soul when the things that I came here to build didn't work, you know?
Say more about that.
Yeah, well, I can feel it now. When I got here, my dad had saved up some money to buy land. And the idea was that I would go raise the money to build the projects, the community and the retreat center. And what we saw happening was when you had a plan for a community with lots on a master plan, you could actually pre-sell those mostly to Americans and Europeans. And they would buy a lot, and after you sold 10, you had enough money for the road and to finish paying off the land if you had a mortgage. And it worked like clockwork. And our idea was to do it, with a mission and an impact. And I thought like spirit and God was guiding me. So I was like, this is 100% aligned. It's going to happen. I was living in a fantasy, and I also didn't know real estate. My dad and I had bought land where we put half the money down and half was in mortgage. And we started to work with the best architects and engineers. It was super inspiring, found amazing properties. And then all of a sudden, 2008 happened and the real estate market just tanked. And my dad came to me one day and said, I'm out of money. And I was like, how much are you out? He was like, all of it. And I said, well, what do we do? And very quickly, our mortgages started to come due with our properties. So there was a month, I remember, and it just like left a pit in my stomach that we owed $30,000 in mortgage payments between 3 properties every month. And my dad said, if we don't find this, we're going to lose it all. And this was my dream. Like I came here to build this like new paradigm of living for humanity, and something's not right. And so, yeah, basically when I was going to Burning Man and all these events, I made a huge network of people, and I essentially started pitching them. like, hey, do you want to invest in my eco village? And the people who became who started as my friends became my investors. And it felt I was treating them as objects. Everything was in order to save my family and be the good son. Because I felt like always like I wanted to be the good son, that I was only worthy if I could prove myself to others. And I think a lot of people sometimes feel that, lack of self-worth and self-doubt. And at the same time, I had met a wonderful woman in New York who later became my wife, quit a job to move to Costa Rica with me. And I believed in my fantasy. I believed we were going to build a retreat center, an eco village, and it didn't work that way. I had gotten really lucky on one of our properties because of an event. There was an investor, a dear friend, who gave us enough money to buy 30 glamping tents. And we built a retreat center because we had a big ranch with a dining table and kitchen. And we started running retreats while this whole thing is happening and our properties are distressed and in trouble. And one part was amazing, that we had thousands of people coming every year, in these retreats. And I had the best healers around me, whether they were famous or not. I saw people going through massive shifts, quitting their jobs, changing their lives. And I felt meaning and purpose. And then I also felt this like really scary thing. And eventually, we got the retreat center full and humming, but the whole house of cards collapsed. I couldn't keep up with the mortgages. My marriage was in shambles because although it sounds fun to run a retreat center, it's like running a restaurant when some people say it's a nightmare. And the conscious people that I thought were like so sweet, they were super needy. Like this concept of community and we're all going to support each other. No, these people were really needy, like just the things that they would ask. And I even got a little bit down on the concept of community.
Give me an example of that. I have a tough time on wrapping my mind around it.
Everyone wanted to be served. They wanted to be served spirituality, served food. Oh, we just brought all the pillows to the magic tree. Can the housekeeping bring them back now to the rooms? It was like this spiritual elitism too. Everyone thought they were on top of the world and that they were studying the most mind-blowing things and everyone else was below them. And my ex-wife one day was like, I can't stand these digital nomads and freaking hippies, I know they seem like peace and kumbaya and community, but they're a needy bunch of kids, like really like spoiled kids.
They're in the adolescent level.
Excuse me. Yeah. And so when things kind of collapsed, I realized that I couldn't keep raising money. I felt like a fraud, like a total freaking fraud, that I was selling a dream, a fantasy that I had. And what nobody saw was that every month we were stressing, trying to pay the bills. We couldn't build anything significant, just paying down debt. And one day it all collapsed. My marriage collapsed. We were trying to get pregnant. It didn't work. The project wasn't working. We didn't have the dream life we imagined. I had told my father, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep raising money. And I couldn't keep the retreat center going. It was 24/7 work. And so, I walked away from it all. My wife and I got a separation, a divorce. I told my dad I'm done, which was not received very well. Kind of letting the family down feeling, I'd already been doing plant medicine, but I went a little deeper to really see what's my purpose. Like, starting to get curious, like, what the hell am I really here for? I did this thing that everyone talks about in the movies and books, like taking a leap of faith and following your heart. And it didn't turn out like the books do. Later, I realized, and if you gave me a magic pill to change any of that, I wouldn't. It was what built resilience in me. It was what helped me now live with integrity and values and not with the lack of those, But I went on a walkabout and I had met a gentleman at the time named Mike Hill, who really helped me out, connected me with alchemist buddy, Avery. And I went to Taos with them and I started studying alchemy. But what I really did was pause my life. I was kind of in an eco rat race. Like, it looked like a different rat race from New York, but it was still a rat race. And so I took a pause just to get curious on what's next, and I brought in a hotel company to run my retreat center. And yeah, later life took a different path, but that was
So
the
do
dark.
you think that the energy you were bringing to that project was narcissistic in terms of like, yes, there's benefit for other people, but the tip of the spear was I want to look important and helpful to my dad and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would get very defensive if you asked me a couple of years ago, but now I realize that yes, I was very narcissistic. And my ex-wife would call me that and I would be like, "No, like I care about people." But it was on the surface. All I cared about was myself and saving my family and how I was going to survive. Obviously, I was in a survival position, but I didn't really feel empathy. It was fake empathy. And I wanted to look good at Burning Man and in Summit and at these TED events, to say, oh, I'm building an eco village and I'm changing
Right.
the world. But what I really needed to do is stop and take a look at changing myself.
What's been interesting about your story so far is if you had asked me to place a bet on your father, I would not have bet that he was a pro spirituality, pro, self reflective improvement kind of person, because most of the time when you find people who have reached a point of the path where they've, gone beyond just the opening the door, that they're really trying to evolve and help others, there's almost always some kind of like very challenging background, and it usually centers around same-sex parent or something in the childhood. What do you think
Yeah.
caused the worldview that you weren't enough and that you had to prove it through acts, through demonstration of achievement?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess, one thing that, I think I had, maybe even culturally as a Russian Jew, is genetically, my family believed that hard work equals value. Your worth comes from how hard you work. Like if I won the lottery, my parents would say, "What are you doing for work?" at that
Right.
time. And my dad had these two sides. He was both spiritual, but he started from nothing in Russia and made money hustling and selling art. And he was a rocket scientist, PhD guy. And he had
Wow.
spent all that money to get us to America and then started from zero again, selling socks at a flea market and built a fortune, a huge fortune, then lost it again. But, it was always that hard work, that resilience, that survival, like couldn't stop him, like when it came to the family and to having freedom, worked our ass off. And so, when I was in high school, I was also a straight A student, wanted to get into a good college, get a good 6-figure job and have 2 kids and a dog and an awesome wife, And so, and I still work on it today. I'm part of a group called Leap Forward, which I'll share a little more about, but where we do probably the deepest inner work I've ever done in the format of group work, where we could reflect these old wounds and stories from each other. And what I realized in doing this work was that most of what I experience as reality is not reality. Most of it is old emotions that were imprinted in my childhood that I'm projecting and reflecting when someone says something to me and reacting from that place. And so it's really hard for me or for others to communicate when we're constantly have this veil of old neurons that, some of them, like survival, are in our DNA, fight or flight. We're not getting chased by a lion, but we could wake up with anxiety as if we were. And so when I mapped some of my pain points, like methodically, I realized there was not good enough, not worthy. And eventually that if I'm not good enough, I'm going to be all alone. My parents won't love me. Society will shun me. And in the old days, in the tribal times, if you got cast out of your tribe, you were dead.
It's over. Yeah.
It's over, like death. And so in a way, I think some of it goes way back in human DNA. Some of it goes to how I was raised to just hustle, like I did in high school, throwing the parties. I was a hustler. I was always trying to make it. And I felt a lot of shame. I looked at myself, like when you read these books on self-love, I lacked it. And only now I'm starting to see my light, but I always felt shame and guilt, like I wasn't good enough, you know, and then
It
eventually
wasn't
started.
until a few years ago for myself that I forgave myself the first time for anything. It took 37 years before I ever forgave myself for a single thing I did in my whole life.
Really?
I, yeah, I think I can empathize really deeply with what you're describing in terms of, the hustler mindset and just that root fear. I think I've lived very much with the same kind of root fear. Um, and I was just sitting by the fire one night trying to figure out, why can't I see my wife for who I know she is? Because we were having real struggles at the time. And it was that veil problem where her trauma was creating, refractions whenever I would do or say something. And then the same thing would happen. We'd end up with this like ping pong of triggering each other back and forth. And I basically decided I'm not getting up from this fire
Mm.
until I figure out what is going on. So this is all pre-spiritual anything.
Wow.
I couldn't figure it out. I was like, what? Logically, this makes no sense. She's not doing or saying anything like maniacal or demonic. So why am I so angry and so unable to be at peace around her?
Yeah.
And finally, after sitting there and I watched my mind try and take me down all these different paths, and I just sort of let it go. I used some stuff that I'd gotten from Pema Chodron around just meditation and being able to separate yourself from your thoughts. And even though I didn't believe anything spiritual, that in and of itself made sense to me. And so I sat through that for, I don't know, probably 40 minutes. And then finally the veil dropped and I could see her for what she was.
Mm.
And I just started bawling uncontrollably. And then I started a new session of bawling probably 10 minutes later, because I started to mourn all that was lost that could have been, in terms of, to your point about, we have available to us all the time an extremely high state of peace and love and joy and prosperity. And it is only ourselves that block us from that. And so I was mourning that loss of, years of unnecessary strife caused by blah, blah, blah. And then the third wave was the realization that I was just a boy. I was just a hurt little boy just trying to survive. And I literally stared at the fire and just said, "You were just a boy. I am just a boy." And I said it over and over. It was just,
Wow.
and that was the start of this journey, really. And I think it was only possible because it allowed me to forgive myself, open my heart enough that there was any chance of healing, because the armor around it was so fucking thick
Mm-hmm.
that there was no way to penetrate it. And it's impossible to have true empathy for other people when your heart is sealed in a vault.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's rare that people get to experience what you did in such a visceral way. I definitely think that our inner childs need more talking to, because they're frozen with those pains. And then rightfully so, our ego, or what we call moving forward, the fraudulent adult, comes with our mechanisms of, defending that scared child. And so, yeah, the more we can pierce through that pain and go through the emotions and touch that child and say, "You're good, Bubba. You're safe," But it's really hard, because to get people to go through that pain and that difficulty of emotions, I mean, you really have to strap them down, because we avoid pain and we seek pleasure. I watched this really short piece called "How Do Lobsters Grow" yesterday by Rabbi Abraham Tversky on YouTube. And basically, lobsters have this really tough shell, right? So how do they grow? Well, eventually they become super uncomfortable in their tough shell. And when the discomfort grows rather enough, they go under a rock, they cast off that shell, and they grow a new one. And here we are in a culture that as soon as we feel discomfort, we're prescribed drugs, Prozac, whatever, any antidepressant, or prescribed medicine. People just go take psychedelics to ease the pain. But I've been fully sober now for 2 years, and I realized that unless I face my pain, and I was smoking a lot of weed after all of the stuff that I went through, just numbing. It was so painful. But it's through sitting with our pain and discomfort, and that's why I believe in group work now, not just having a guru or a teacher. if we have friends who can reflect us and pause us and ask us, what are you feeling? And stay in that pain. I'm feeling anxious. Well, what's the story? Are you getting chased by a lion? No, I'm feeling anxious because I feel like I have a lot to do. And you keep going and it's like, oh shit, I'm not good enough, or whatever the core pain point is. And then you can rewire and you can say, what's true? Well, I'm safe. I'm safe here. Unless you literally have a gun to your head, you're safe.
Right.
And I am good enough just as I am, without my startup or saving the world or all this stuff. Then you can start to rewire. And that's why I think it's so important to have a strong friend group and community, even one friend who can pause you and presence you when you're out of integrity and say, hey man, like, you're a little fast. There's something up, you know? And
I saw just yesterday,
yeah,
it was a graph, and it's, standard medical research, but meaning like Western research, but it demonstrated correlation with longevity. And the number one thing was network.
Yeah, they have
over anything else, over diet, over exercise, over anything. It was, do you have a supportive community of people that love you and that you love?
Yeah, I think in the Blue Zone study in like Sardinia and in different places in Okinawa, Greece, like they play games, they gather. But I do want to touch on this. One is everything you just shared and we talked about. I really would love people to feel that they're not uniquely disturbed. They're not alone. Yes. We're so, especially with these post-pandemic times, we've been locked up in our houses. Everyone's going through the same shit and nobody talks about it.
Yep.
We're all feeling some version of this stuff to different degrees, even if they're celebrities, they have some of the biggest issues with self-image and doubt.
Sure. Especially child celebrities. God help them.
Yeah, and also I think in this movement of community, I really didn't know what community was. I thought it was an eco-village. I thought it was Burning Man. And sure, there was some community there, but real community, people who really are there for you, people who align in values. In Leap Forward, we signed a contract of integrity. We're always on time. We'll reflect truth to people, even if it's painful. We don't sugarcoat stuff. And now that I'm in the space of supporting people who are building communities and eco-villages and retreat centers, I give them some really harsh truth, And a lot of them they tell me, oh, I'm changing my life. I'm quitting my hedge fund or my 9-to-5, and I want to go to Costa Rica and have a peaceful life and start a retreat center or a community. And I'm like, you think that's peaceful?
Right.
I tell them my story and some of them are like, oh my God. And then the other thing that someone said to me, my buddy Faisal, who has this amazing book called Flow, he said to me, and he's a Gujarati Indian, he said, Edward, all of your friends want to change the world, but they got to change their own ass first.
That's right.
And it's true. I see all these people here like, oh, we're building the most regenerative community of the future. And I was one of them, just freaking yapping away. And we're going to have plant medicine on tap, But yeah, what about changing ourselves and modeling that, and giving that fragrance to the world? That's interesting for me.
I literally just yesterday posted on Facebook a quote: to a disciple who was forever complaining about others, the master said, if it is peace you want, seek to change yourself, not other people. It is easier to protect your feet with slippers than to carpet the whole of the earth.
Wow. I'm just going to sit with that. Yeah, it gave me goosebumps. I'm very resonant with that.
And it's because that scared child that is inescapable. It is the original sin, the part of you that doesn't realize you're divine when you're born, that must take on the trauma. No one escapes childhood unmarred. That hurt child has to one day be willing to accept, I'm doing this to myself, and start the healing process. And it's so scary. So it's so much easier to say, well, fuck the Russians and fuck the Chinese and fuck the Jews and fuck this and it's everybody but me. I need everybody else to change everything so that my inner state will be peaceful and harmonic. And it it's both beautiful and terrifying to realize you can be shining like a beacon. You can become Christ, Buddha, whoever, if you just sit down and start doing the work. But man,
Let's
some
dive into
sweat-inducing work.
Yeah, and let's go a little deeper into that, because one of the most useful things I was given as a tool was laying on the ground, literally just laying on the ground. And I went on what I called an Edpasana last January. I shut down a company I was working on. I broke up with my girlfriend at the time, realized there was a lot of codependence. I quit smoking weed, and I went up to the mountains, and I was like, okay, here it is. I'm going to feel everything. And it took me like a day or two, like thoughts were racing. Then eventually I just laid on the ground and just laid and didn't move. And Ronit Hertzfeld, a woman I met about a year and a half ago, the founder of Leap Forward, who, just a quick side note first, like I always look for great teachers. And she was a woman who had studied with Ram Dass and Thich Nhat Hanh and worked with the Dalai Lama and all these people, and was also a trauma psychologist and worked in a mobile crisis unit. So she, for me, was an amazing model of like psychology and psychiatry and spirituality, and realized most of teachers and people didn't walk their walk, okay? And people don't want to go to the discomfort zones that we just talked about. And just like restraint therapy, where you have to restrain one hand, like if you had like a stroke and one of your arms wasn't moving, you restrain the other arm so one can start to have to be under pressure and train harder. It literally takes that with the human psyche, because as soon as I was going to those deep pains, I would bounce off or I would go numb. You couldn't keep me there. And lying on the ground became a great therapy she recommended, because eventually during my Adpasana, the tears started to frickin' roll. I didn't need to sit and meditate. That's why I didn't go on Vipassana. I think it's very valuable, and I've had meditation retreats, but I just needed to lay and be with my emotions and not distract with work or friends or plant medicine. And man, when those tears started to roll, I could see like my childhood and my life traumas like a movie. All of them, just like duck, 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 duck. No plant medicine needed. Like I felt it all. And then I continued for 7 days. It was horrible and amazing at the same time. I couldn't escape. I wanted to go garden and walk. And I had my one companion is my dog, Maya. And I was like, okay, that's enough. I got to go hike with Maya, But I couldn't tell you how much my mind wanted to get out of there. And so when I met Ronit, she really bothered me at first, because she said, oh, I heard a lot about you. And I was like, what did you hear? Like, thinking she's going to say something cool, like, oh, you're this cool dude. No, she was like, I heard you were a fraud. I'm like,
oh, shit.
Yeah. She was like,
That's
I heard.
A bold opener.
Yeah, she went right after my pain point. She usually turns the volume up and then down. But she said to me, no, I heard you're a fraud and a scam artist. Literally what was said about me by my ex-wife at the time. And she wasn't wrong, so I don't want to make her wrong for saying that. There was a lot of fraudulence. Even though I didn't do actual fraud, I was living a fantasy persona. And when she said that, I had realized that I hadn't healed from all the pain around my business failing with my dad, the retreat center and community, the divorce. And she said, come join this group for a session, see what we do. It's called Leap Forward. The website is leapforward.us. And the group was the most striking example of community I could imagine. These were people from all walks of life, some rich, some poor, some black, some white, really there to support each other in not the kindest, like, white, soft gloves way. Like, they're like, Ed, why are you showing up this way in a certain case? Or is that true? You want to regenerate the world and help usher humanity? Like, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit. And so that was my restraint therapy. And again, not with a guru. Ronit was there to help guide a little bit. They had made an entire map of being for the swamp of what is inside of us. And in terms of personal development, and it's on their website, like anyone can see it for free. The group is free. So I was not being with another coach for $2,500 a month or whatever. This was non-transactional to model a different kind of humanity. And yeah, in the map of being, it shows all of these blocks and things in our child. But yeah, here I was with a group who was restraining me in a way to be with my emotions and to just put them in my face and see what's true and together reprogram. So yeah, that was a major thing for me when we go into like feeling what is tough to feel and not numbing.
Mm.
Yeah, and 2 years later, still part of that group. I dedicate half my time to that work and half to my work of
Oh, wow.
business. Although now it's kind of blending. I'll tell you later why, but yeah.
Fascinating. So after you went on your Edpasana, how long did you stay in that sort of grounding ceremony, and what did you do and feel when you got back?
Yeah, I was kind of upset because I felt like when I got out of Edpasana in this small town of Chiripo, Costa Rica, I was camping on top of a friend's property, like just me in a tent in a little bathroom. And when I got down, I didn't have a job at the time. I had paused my company to just quiet life down. I had, just so you know what I paused, like I was basically, after my retreat center shut down, I was building, I was hired to build 100 retreat centers around the world. And then when COVID happened, I was consulting a bit and helping. Essentially, I was trying to raise money for a company to build these small retreat centers to help people heal and bridge to alternative ways of living. That's always been my passion, to bridge people to better ways of life. And we weren't able to raise money for the company. And so my business partner and I decided to pause it the day before I went on Edpasana. And I quieted down my life. And so I was a little worried, like, what am I going to do? I always had this fear of survival and money and, stuff, like a Jewish kid from New York, like without a hustle, And when I left, I felt like this peace. Like everything was just good. Things were quiet. Like I was walking through this little town, like everything's going to be perfect. My mind was slow. I felt connected to my feelings and to my core. And that lasted about 2 weeks. I was like, oh, this is going to be forever. I was even acting kind of enlightened to my friends. I was like,
yeah.
Too much.
Oh man, I feel that all too hard.
I was like,
all my friends listening will be LOLing at that one.
Yeah, I was like, I have nothing to say. Just be with me. But yeah, eventually, the fast system of the brain kicks in, and I'm still human. And I actually was like, I hadn't had a job in a while. I was an entrepreneur always. And I even went to think like, wow, I know one thing for sure is that I need time, no matter what I do for work, to be with my feelings and to just be with me. And I got a little house in the woods, like a cabin in the mountains. And it was perfect for me. It was like just my place to be me with me. And I was actually looking for a job, like a job. So I knew I would have security. I didn't have to become a millionaire. I just wanted to know that for a period of time, my pursuit of money was not my life. I could have a simple job and that's it. But funny enough, as soon as I accepted the job, mind you, I was someone who built hotels and I was getting a job as a general manager of a small hotel. I didn't care, like, wasn't about the ego. I was thrilled just to like have a job. And as soon as I said yes to the job and kind of swallowed that pride a bit, the job fell through in a funny way. The owner of the hotel was like, I don't think I can give you this job. Like, you're way overqualified. And like, we don't pay, like we pay $1,000 a month, our highest position. And I did the math and I was like, yeah, that's for a 9 to 5, that's a lot. And like not a lot for me to be able to live. And kind of surrendered to the universe for a bit. I had a couple months of savings, not much. I knew for like 2-3 months I could still be an inquiry. And then a friend of mine asked me basically a question, like he wanted to build the thing I was trying to build as a company, like wanted to build a vacation home that can be income producing and that he could have kind of as an Airbnb rental, like a number of cabins that almost was like a retreat center, just not so difficult, but could produce income, could be a plan B if shit hit the fan in the US. And for me, it was beautiful because I saw something like this as a bridge for the people who stayed at his bed and breakfast or rental, that they could have a taste of Costa Rica and of alternative living and taste one of the towns. I had imagined these all over Costa Rica. We called them nucleos at the time because it was like a nucleus with the little things around it. And essentially the thing I wanted to do myself, other people were asking me to do for them as a consultant. And I said, okay, like, here's my monthly rate. I'll help you get a vision together, put a team together, make the financial strategy, even help you find the right land. And realized it was really cool helping others build their dreams, not always having to have my own that was so stressful. And also make sure that they're in alignment, not just with Mother Nature, because there's a neocolonialism happening where people are just coming to extract here and build their white mansions and tear up the jungle, and they think they're doing good and they're in community. But I really ask people to, one, listen to their hearts and their guts, like what do they really need? And really build a vision that's small enough that it won't eat them up, especially if they're married or with a girlfriend or with kids. You know, one that can actually allow them to live a good life, enjoy part of this thing, not be part of an eco rat race. And then made sure as a connector that they were connected to the best teams, that they had lawyers, accountants, all the stuff that, all the mistakes I made here, I didn't want them to make, buying the wrong property that you can't build on, and, you know, hiring the wrong architect and wasting 50K. I mean, on average, I think I saved people like 100 or 200K of mistakes, you know. Our friend Phil would tell me that I don't explain that well enough when I work with people.
Pitch.
Yeah, in the pitch. I don't like to pitch so much. But yeah, mostly I realized I was aligning people to their vision and to their purpose, and then helping execute that with them, not for them. And and helping them get some aspect of this new way of life going, you know.
So that actually brings me to something that we had talked about before starting, which is what the hell is going on around the world right now? Because it does seem like we're in this bizarre yin yang of so many people waking up or clearly having the impulse to, at the same time that seems like everything's going to shit.
Yeah.
You know, literally Paris getting burnt down, you know, over the last several days in protests, all the chaos in the US, Ukraine under war for over a fucking year.
Yeah. Man.
I mean, it's madness. And then at the exact same time, at least in my 40 years, I've never seen a time where more people are opening their hearts, trying to find truth.
Well, I think, and thank you for bringing this point up. I think at all times of life, there's this and that. Like, now that I'm connected to feeling more, I'm feeling the most happiness I've ever felt while connecting to deep sadness for what's happening in the world. America's divided in many countries, vax, no vax, Black Lives Matters, other people, all of it. You know, it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican. We have people divided. We have kids under an onslaught of social media and school and issues like transgender stuff coming up that they don't know what to do with, you know, and we have wars, scary what's happening in Ukraine, you know, and all over the world. You know, North Korea has been the way it's been for ages, and we don't talk about it. There's concentration camps, not just when Hitler built them, they exist today. But we kind of put it away, and we have our Jamba Juice, you know, like life's okay here. So, yeah, the world, humanity is under a lot of pressure. And the bright side of it is when an organism is under this much pressure, it evolves. And the reason why I said I dedicate half my time to Leap Forward, it's my one community organization, is I really believe in the evolution of humanity. I see people in Costa Rica who are starting to model the dream of what's possible. I wish we were more of curiosity versus knowing. That was one of my things, that I was a know-it-all. I could tell you everything about everything. But stepping back and starting to be curious, what's going on? Really, like, what's going on? And I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves thinking we're building utopia in places like Bali and Costa Rica when people haven't figured out the people part. And that's why I said that quote about change your own ass first.
Right.
We really have to look at ourselves before we go out and solve the problems of the world. If I can't be with me and me, or you with the wife and kids, if we're modeling this in our families and there's war in our families, there's going to be war externally, always. It's like a bunch of big kids out there, except now they have nuclear weapons, you know?
Yeah, hurt people hurt people.
So I'm really hopeful for humanity, and I'm really scared at the same time, because I see us at a point of evolution where we're the lobster that's under enough pressure. You know, they called it, there's a thing about fish with eyes, because fish didn't used to have eyes. And
Oh,
then,
really?
no, and then they evolved under a lot of pressure and went up a little bit closer to the surface and got to see.
Oh.
But, you know, essentially I'm faithful and I'm hopeful that humanity will evolve from all this pressure and change these destructive habits that we have. And I also think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so I could only wish people start to build the muscle of resilience. Thankfully, a lot of the shit that I went through helped me with that, but I'm still building it. And I wish people understood that they're not alone. Like, if they get anything out of listening to us for an hour or however long we speak for, it's, you're not alone. You know, there are people out there who are feeling the same hurt and the same pain. And if we can actually make our internal worlds visible to others and stop wearing these masks, when I meet people now, I tell them about my deepest shit, sometimes on the airplane to a stranger. And it's my nature, but it's also to share our humanity, our universal humanity. You know, we are not alone. And if we can actually see that and come together and hold ourselves to our best self, go through our shit together, rub, like, you know, in eco villages, people can't stand each other's pets and dogs. You know, it's one of the big issues in eco villages. But yeah, it's when they start to argue and bicker, and things will start to happen when we start to face those uncomfortable emotions and feelings. And so, yeah, right now, I decided to put more time and effort into it. And in Leap Forward, we have a project called Museum of Awe. So we're building a museum in New York, an experience to show a child's life through ages 1 through 7. We have the first womb where we're in our mother's womb, you know, and we treat a mother, you know, no smoking, no drinking. We care for our mothers all over the world, right? But as soon as you go into the second womb, when you're birthed, from 1 to 7, you're yelled at, put on your clothes, we're late for school. And so to elucidate that experience of a child getting bombarded and all these emotional, shocking experiences, divorce, abuse, you know, you name it. And also to show the perspective of the parents who are stressed, who are trying to get to work to make enough money to pay for that kid's after school program in school. And, you know, to elucidate what's really going on here. And then connect in curiosity is what can we do better? Because if we don't help the next generation of kids, you know, our generation, good luck with ayahuasca and plant medicine and healers, but we really have a chance with the kids. And I don't have kids of my own, but I feel it. I felt it the other day viscerally. It brought me to tears. You know, walking through an airport when I just traveled to New York, you see how parents are just talking to these kids and yelling at them, and the kids like saying "F you, mom," and I'm like, how do you know that word at your age? And like, if I said that to my parents, I'd be, you know, smacked up my head. But something's going on, and it's obvious to people. And if we start to talk about it more, our school systems, how we treat each other, maybe we can avoid some of the potential calamities that are facing humanity, the existential threats against humanity. And there's a nuanced complexity to this that's not so simple, that you can't just self-help away and go meditate away, you know?
Yeah, and I read an article, I don't know if it was 6 months ago, a year ago. It was talking about philanthropy, and the gist was the farther away from your personal nucleus you get, the less effective you are, and eventually it turns into harm. So if we think in the US that we're going to help Ukraine from the US with munitions and all this stuff, we're deluding ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if I think that I can change the state of Massachusetts through some effort of mine, that I'm going to transform everybody's lives, that is deluded. If I have not myself achieved I don't want to say perfect union, but like really done an unbelievable amount of work. I can barely influence my wife. Right? Now, children are open and receptive to all sorts of ideas and change and what have you, but I just don't see any other way of, to your point, we've got a lot of really complex problems. Like we haven't even touched on the idea of artificial intelligence and
Yeah.
climate change and all these things. There's a lot of stuff afoot. And if we can't stabilize ourselves to the point where we're not all at each other's throats, how are we going to do anything?
Yeah.
That raises the question, and I think quite a bit about this. Where do people start? If someone knows, like, yes, I'm hurt and I have absolutely no idea where to get going because I've either tried talk therapy or I don't believe in talk therapy or what have you, and they have either no access to plant medicine or that's just not calling to them. Like, where do you think people get started?
It's a great question. I'm happy you asked that because it's a practical question. One, I think starting with the pause yourself when you're feeling these feelings of anxiousness, fear, doubt, and just check in. What am I feeling? Like I'm feeling right now a little bit anxious about all the stuff we talked about, in the world. And just to feel that for a bit and not make it wrong and marinate in that feeling. And once you've felt that feeling enough and you've truly been with it, which we don't like to do, then starting to look at what's the story? Like, where is this feeling coming from? What am I really anxious about? What am I really angry about if anger comes up? Like starting to look at these stories and even maybe mapping them and unpacking them as stories. Like I'm angry, I'm afraid, looking at some of our defense mechanisms against that. So, okay, I feel that I'm not good enough and not worthy, so I might act like a know-it-all, to show people to how worthy I am, or might be fraudulent. And so I think just the most powerful tool is pause. What am I feeling? And then later, what's the story? And to always anchor in what's reality. Because again, like we mentioned, unless your reality is that you have a gun to your head or you're literally being chased by a lion while you ask yourself, what am I feeling? Likelihood is that the reality is that you're safe. Again, not if you're in a war zone. But for those who are listening to this, who I imagine aren't in a war zone right now, looking at it and saying, what am I feeling? What's the story? And what's true? And constantly re-anchoring in what's true. Eventually, scientifically, neurologically, you can start to rewire the brain to have a direct experience of reality. And one of the best things that I would recommend people to do is if you have a trusted friend or even a colleague, it doesn't have to be what you think is your friend group, which for me changes sometimes when I think of my friends and I think of who's really there for me. You could do this kind of work with them or a loved one. I did it with my ex-girlfriend a lot, where we would presence a lot. Like we'd be in the car and I'd be yapping away and she was like, what are you feeling? And I'd be like, fuck. Okay, here we go. Time to go down the rabbit hole, And we would start to share and start to dive deeper and deeper. And, I was feeling, let's say as an example, nervous about work and money and survival. And so I was yapping my brains away. And so we'd go deeper and deeper and then seeing what the story is. Like, I'm not going to be able to survive and pay rent. I'm not good enough. I'm going to die. Eventually they all lead to death, or essential human fear. But just getting in that practice of presencing and being paused and pausing someone who's around you, that's real friendship to me, because it's people who care enough to help grow with you. That's what I meant by community means something different for me now. It's not like a bunch of people to sing Kumbaya and do men's work and do permaculture and plant food. That's cool. Like, we need that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But community, to me, are friends who are really there and hold me accountable between me and show me and will reflect to me truth, even if it's uncomfortable, and sit with me in that discomfort and be okay with that. That takes a lot from a friend. And I don't have many of those. I have a small community of those friends now that we do this work together. And I think that's one of the most amazing things, other than working with yourself and pausing. You know, we talked about laying on the ground and just being. I mean, I did it for 6 hours, you know, and that was an extreme. And Edpasana, I could only do it for an hour, like now on a weekend. But it's so uncomfortable, and my mind always wants to do something else, like garden or Tai Chi or go for a walk. But just being with you and quieting your life down, I had to redesign my life to the point where I have my work, I have my lunch and my food breaks, and I have these times in my day, morning, evening, and interspersed, where I do nothing. I'm with me and me. And designing your life, life mapping, I do a lot of it with my clients. It's critical, because you might not have the hours, or it could be 5 minutes, a little break between calls, go stretch and sit and just feel. And the final thing I say is we have a lot of free resources on the Leap Forward website. It's free, so I don't mind plugging it. It's leapforward.us. And there's a pause button on the website, or a separate link that's called pause.us, that actually shows the entire map of being, of this human conditions and our loops and our flailing child and our fraudulent adult. But I encourage people to go to that website and read and reach out. We're just about to launch a public library of resources.
Nice.
I don't know exactly when, but it's coming, because we want to give these tools to others. And again, I've probably been on the personal growth journey, I would say 25 years. I'm a journaler of 20 years. I've went to every healer, practitioner, Tony Robbins, Chopra's, you name it. I studied ancient alchemy with one of the best alchemists in the world. I've never found a stronger tool than the ones offered in Leap Forward to really create lasting change that led me to a lot of moments of happiness and sadness. And that, to me, is the goal. It's not to be enlightened and go sit on a rock somewhere. It's to be fully alive, to experience life in its fullness, both sadness, happiness, the good, the bad, the ugly, really to experience it all, because otherwise we're asleep, like Einstein said. There's nothing more to this life than to be able to experience the ride fully, you know?
There's a close friend of mine who splits his time between Costa Rica and America. He's probably my first spiritual mentor. I hope to have him on actually in a couple of weeks. And I was in the middle of my deepest spiritual crisis since this whole thing started, where I just reached a sort of pit of nihilism, because I had come to the conclusion that we're all God, just slowly waking up and realizing it. And that, you know, time is an illusion and everything is infinite and everything's already been experienced and blah, 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 blah. And then if you believe that to be true, there can be a crushing feeling of, so what? Like if I already am all that is, then like, who cares? Like, whoa. And we were having breakfast, and he held my hand and he just said, the point of life is to live. And it just hit me like a bullet train. It took me totally off my feet. And it's, to your point, it's not about hedonistic, you know, collection of highs. It's about feeling the whole roller coaster. And it's beautiful when you show up at the funeral and you can't even control the outpouring of emotion because of how much love you had for this person. And it's just what a poetic thing that there could be a connection so deep that it would cause this much energy to come up, and to have a relationship with that in that way, as opposed to pushing those feelings away and crumbling underneath them, and then all of the sordid stuff that happens afterwards. It's like, it seems to be that that's the whole game, is being courageous enough to feel whatever needs feeling and just surf your way the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah, I resonate deeply with that. Just to live. I mean, we're a speck of sand in the universe. To think that we have, like, just to be humble for a moment and to think that, we have some grand purpose here. Like, we are just an infinitesimal, tiny little bit here, and just to experience life. I have my dog having a little dream under me, so she's making sounds. But yeah, just to be like, just to walk and experience nature and be in awe and cry at a funeral. That's why I couldn't believe how long I was numb when I was smoking weed.
Mm-hmm.
Now I couldn't imagine, and nothing wrong with weed for those who enjoy it as a medicine, but I wasn't. I was smoking every day. Just to be alive now and to feel the rapture of life, to feel that liveliness in all of it, and sad and happy. Like, there's not much more to do. And that's like, I never understood those spiritual people who are like, in a lot of the books, there are these themes of like, there's nothing you have to achieve here. You just have to be, and that's good
Right.
enough.
Human beings, not human doings.
Yeah. Not human doings. And that's one of my things. I have to slow down because I catch myself in the soldier mode. And, if we just be and we go through all of life, right? Things happen to us, marriage, divorce, war, peace. And we evolve as human beings during that. As our emotions and things and cycles happen, we evolve. And a perspective someone shared with me that was really eye-opening was, well, if it doesn't really matter what you achieve, like you won an award, you regenerated the planet, whatever you did, if you just live this life as a human being fully and you go through all those emotional roller coasters and ups and downs, you're literally evolving the DNA for the next, you're evolving the genetics for the next, 100 years, 1,000 years for those who come after you. That's why it really doesn't matter what you do, just being is hard enough, and growing and groping and asking and being curious. So, it's funny because when you invited me to be part of this podcast, I haven't given a talk. I used to give a lot of talks at events and festivals on community and just yapped away. But the reason why I stopped giving talks was because I started to get more curious, to be in not knowing. And I felt this was an opportunity to be curious together. I obviously shared certain things that have worked for me, but I think if we have a chance at humanity now, and to just be and to just live, it's to live in curiosity. Some of the smartest and most incredible people, Da Vinci and etc., that was their primary state of curiosity. He would throw water up and look, is the sky really blue, and that water is in between. And, if we can live in curiosity and live in wonder and live in awe of this incredible life, I think we have a chance to do some amazing things. And to
I think you're
evolve.
absolutely right. And I think if we had to analyze how that goes sideways, especially in Western culture, I am really guilty of heavy left brain, masculine sort of living, very logical, very like structured, very goal oriented. And my survival mechanism, because I grew up in a fairly tumultuous household where I never felt safe. My survival mechanism was, if I can understand enough about if this then that, then I can protect myself by, being ahead of the curve. And so I constantly, all kids, why? But I mean, I was like to the 20th degree. I needed to understand how and why everything worked. And there's a lot of utility in that. And it helps me a lot in my vocation and just being in general, like a part of the world. I think I understand how things work generally better than the average person because I've amassed this, archive of knowledge from asking why 10 trillion times and keep going deeper and deeper.
Beautiful.
But what it severed me from is the divine feminine of creation and wonder and chaos and beauty and all the other sides of life. And I found it being a big detractor or deterrent in part of this spiritual work, is that I would get so caught up in trying to figure out the puzzle Like, what is God, and how does quantum physics fit into it, and what does this mean, and what is alchemy, and how do you manifest? And you just get all into it because you can see that it's all connected once you get deep enough in, and there's just this compulsion, at least I have it, to want to figure it out and pull all the pieces together. And you can't be in that state and the state of wonder at the same time. You know, you can't look up at the night sky and just be bewitched with what you see and be trying to think about, well, how many millions of light years, and are wormholes real? And right, those two things I feel like are at tensor opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying myself through art, both, you know, physical. I started playing drums a few years ago. Certainly encouraging my kids to be deep into, you know, different types of art. And I've been trying to get back into that myself. I started painting fairly recently again. And it's just, it's hard to not be in flow state when you are in awe or when you are creating. And I just never feel anxious in flow state. I never feel afraid or stressed or anything. But to be there, you almost have to let go of shore, right? You have to let go of certainty. You have to let go of this need to control. And then it's in that surfing state of just like, I'm just being, that's, to me, that's nirvana. That's the state of bliss, is when you can just stop worrying about anything and just show up.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I like that you said the uncertainty, because I think that's a critical element. You know, the masculine side of us is so attached to certainty and wanting to know, at least in me, everything that's going to happen and how it's going to unfold. But it's in uncertainty that some of the biggest magic in my life has happened, in between jobs or relationships where I don't know what the hell is going on. And it's deeply uncomfortable, right? In some cases, to be in uncertainty. It's deeply comfortable when we're in a creative state, like in music and art, and when I'm in my garden and it's just flow. And I always, I've been weaving more of that into my life. I have a few instruments around now, even though I'm not a musician. I'm in my garden more. My neighbor's an artist, so I've been doing some fun stuff with him, just training muscles that I don't have. Even some of the healing arts, I do Tai Chi. But in general, I think that related to what we were talking about earlier, to that muscle of resilience that I think is healthy for us to build as a society, and at least for me has been healthy, it comes from being okay with uncertainty. And so in a way, I'm not happy that what happened with the pandemic or whatever, but people are in a massive state of uncertainty, and it's starting to get comfortable with uncertainty. And now I'm starting to dance with it more than I ever have. And that's why I don't think I value all those books I read. And that alchemist that I mentioned to you stopped teaching and stopped studying and moved into the forest recently, Avery. And he just wants to start walking his walk more and being. And we're talking about that. He's like, I'm just walking in nature and observing now. And he's an extreme example of that, of being with himself, but starting to dance with life and to play. To me, it's and this is new for me, like in the last year or so, but I'm in such a state of uncertainty, even with my work and different stuff of clients and what projects I'm working on. And now I'm working on a museum in New York. And, you know, it's like, wow, like life is so magical. And the more I stop playing small and surrender to uncertainty, the more the magic of life can begin to unfold for me and with me and through me. So I love that you use that word. And I think there is an aspect of that divine feminine, that softness, that play, that and it's also the reason why I'm surrounded with and work with a lot of women now is, you know, it is a healthy balance for my divine masculine, which is important to be a foundation and to have that stability, but also within that to have the dance, you know. So yeah, I think it's a muscle, you know, myelin sheath that wraps around our nerves that if we can start to grow that muscle of being cool with uncertainty, I think we're going to ride the wave of what's happening now. I don't even want to say what's coming because it's already happening. We're always like thinking about like some doomsday event, but look at what's happening around the world right now. You know, we're already in it. We've already been shocked and awed and jarred and twisted and pulled. People have lost jobs. Countries are at war. So let's not fool ourselves that this is coming. Like climate change and all this stuff, like we're in it. And so now it's to start to ask ourselves those tough questions like you did, why? And actually to start walking some of that walk ourselves, because I realized that, yeah, I can have an impact on the world, sure. And I help a small village here in Costa Rica, not a massive charity. So I do work of social impact. I help a school here in like the most impoverished neighborhood. But really, if I really want to change anything external, I got to start dealing with what's going on inside, you know, and we talked about that a lot today, but just being with it and seeing what's up and talking to that inner child, like, it's all good, Bubba. Like,
right.
You know, like your parents were yelling at you, but it's not because of you. You're all good.
Because their parents yelled at them and their parents yelled at them. And
Maybe we could stop perpetuating some of this stuff. And we have an initiative called Heed the Children and Leap Forward that's trying to educate parents on conscious parenting and what's happening in school systems, and especially with social media. You know, the CDC just said like kids under, I think, 16 shouldn't be exposed to social
I think
media.
that's probably right.
And we have these freaking fear devices here that are putting, you know, things on Instagram and TikTok, and kids want to be a certain way and their favorite actor is now this or that or transgender. And it's like, I'm not saying anything's right or wrong here. I'm just saying that we can't have, like, in such a malleable teenage age of their minds, getting that kind of bombardment by companies and programming. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there are some things we can do with ourselves, and anyone who's a parent out there starting to really take responsibility of what's happening with our children in society today.
Question for you about intention versus surrender, because this is something that I struggle with, especially recently. Because in order to surf, you have to have surrendered. Otherwise, you're clinging to something.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find that my greatest anxiety is when I don't have a true north, when I don't have a plan, you know. And so I've been really, it's been probably about a year where it's like, I used to be the kind of guy who had a written 1, 3, 5, and 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And like every week I would sit down and I would look at, okay, how am I doing against this and blah, blah, blah. And for the last 3 years, I haven't written a single thing down in terms of goals. I used to have them for physical, for my relationships, financial, right? All this stuff. And now it's like, I am here at the service of the universe or God or whatever you want to call it. And I will just, you know, show up and interact with the world and just be my highest self that I can be in the moment, every moment until I die. And there's something really beautiful in the concept of that. But at the same time, it's like, but what am I aiming towards exactly? So how do you balance those two things, or do you?
I don't know. I don't know. I could tell you, I could tell you my exploration around that, which is, there's a constant surrender for me that I don't know what the hell is going to happen with my security, with my job, with my love, with my whatever. And I know at any moment and it could all end. So I'm soaking up every moment of life. Although we just talked about all the crazy stuff happening in the world. I mean, I felt like I was on ecstasy this morning, walking down my driveway, looking at the butterflies and just at nature. So I don't know in terms of how to balance surrender and intentionality. I could tell you that I have certain parts of my life that I plan out and I'm intentional, which is mostly around self-care. And I really organize it into my day, into my calendar. Even if it has to shift a bit, I organize my calendar of how I want it to be. Like when I work, when I'm on calls, when I'm meditating, all of the things when I want breaks. But then I'm also in full surrender that if something comes up, which it happens here in the jungle a lot, power goes out or this, I could be agile. That's why I really like people who explain to me how agile development works,
Yep.
both in software and in life, because you can have certain plans and then also be agile if those change or if you feel something different. So I'm intentional about how I spend my time. Super intentional. I even about a month ago, I realized I had certain goals of like what we were talking about, time with myself and learning. I love to learn. And I realized that if I'm on too many friend calls during the week or hanging out with friends after work, Monday to Friday, I'm not getting the rest that I need. And I'm not hitting my personal development stuff like my wellness stuff like yoga every day. It just seems to be like not enough hours in the day and I'm missing one or two things that I want to do each day.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a huge intention that like weekdays is me and me. I don't see anybody. It's really rare that if I do, if like a friend is flying in, I'm not like super, nothing for me is an absolute, but I've been treating it as that in the last couple of weeks. Man, Matt, I can't tell you how good I feel. I'm sleeping, I'm reading, I have time. And I'm getting so much done at work, and I'm having huge breaks during work to just go walk my dog or stretch a bit. I've been incorporating like the things like yoga and stretching and meditation also within my day. So it's not just at that bliss hour in the morning. I'll sit for 5 minutes. So I'm really intentional with how I use my time. And on the weekends, really liberal with it. I garden, I chill, I go see friends, So
Do you find you're able to be more present with your friends on the weekends now that you don't have the drain of not enough sleep or focus or whatnot during the week?
100%. And I'm also being very intentional. Like one of our mutual friends, Phil, like we went on a 3-hour hike and I was really there with him. And instead of going to like hang out with a group of friends, which is not bad, I do that too. But the people I really care about, my friends, my community from Leap Forward, whoever it is, I'm really intentional about spending one-on-one time with them or a small group and really connecting. Because, we could just chit chat about this and that, but when we connect, it's about the deep stuff, And I guess the other thing that is structured in my life versus surrendering is I'm really structured at my values and my integrity. And so that won't waver for anyone or anything. Even if I have to lose a client at work, I consult like all these people who are building cool projects. Could be a home or it could be a eco village or retreat. Doesn't matter what they're building. And I tell them some harsh truths like this is not aligned for you or this is too big or, this is feeling them. I'm like, this is off with what you just shared with me. And I won't waver from that anymore because I'm not doing them a service if I lip service them and tell them. One of my old defense mechanisms was people pleasing. Because I thought I wasn't good enough, I would just tell people what they wanted to hear to be the nice guy. Right. And so, the parts of me that are unwavering now are that truth and honesty at all costs. Even if it costs me a job, costs me whatever, I don't care. I'm not in service to myself or others if I'm out of integrity. And that came down to also seeing that if I'm out of integrity, saying I want to live a balanced life and I don't have time for the things like reading or health stuff, then I can't do it. I go to AA meetings because I was a marijuana addict. There's something called MAA, Marijuana Anonymous. And I wasn't hitting the meetings. They're online meetings. So I was fooling myself like I'm in this program, even though I wasn't smoking weed. And so I was like, man, for me to hit AA every day, I have to go at 7 a.m. That's structured. That's the one time that I could see I could be consistent. If I miss it, there are meetings online at other hours. I had to shift my whole morning routine. That's usually my yoga time and tea and journaling. I freaking have a journal all the time. But like there are things that I want to really be structured about hitting and not miss. And then there are things I surrendered to, like the other day when the thunderstorm took out our Wi-Fi. And I had all these plans to have Zoom calls and to catch up with a friend and to study and da-da-da-da-da. And none of that happened, so I surrendered. Just hung out with my dog, chilled. You know, I had a book I haven't read in a while. Opened like one chapter of it, and I was actually kind of guilty. I'm like, when am I going to read this book? Yeah, thunderstorm came. Surrender. Read your book. Lay on the
I
floor.
find myself constantly trying to work on that part of letting go and acceptance of myself is walking around my house and seeing the things that I want to attend, like books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard. It's funny how such little tiny things can wear away at you like water on a stone. You know, the guilt of I'm not enough because, oh, I have this thing. Other people don't have this thing. Surely I have the time, but I'm
Right.
not choosing to dedicate it. And it's just like 1 second every day of walking by, glimpsing it out of your eye, and you're like self-flagellating. And it's that times 1,000. And then all of a sudden you wonder why you're so wound tight
Yeah.
and ready to snap.
Yeah.
It's like an onion layer. Yeah, you have to constantly be relaxing enough to peel it back and get one more layer off so that you can be that much more present, that much more patient.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that you touched on the guilt. I feel like guilt and shame are such ever-present ones in our lives, you know? Again, making our internal world visible, just talking about this with you and to other people and amongst friends. I never used to talk about my guilt and shame with my friends, you know? Talk about airy-fairy shit. And yeah, I think, yeah, just being with some of these feelings. And when you were saying, like, about the book in the house, like, I've felt that my room here has been a little cluttered. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, 2 days ago, I was like, oh, on the weekend, I'm going to declutter that. But the weekend doesn't exist. There's only now, right?
Yep.
So I stopped. I took one thing that was bothering me specifically, and I moved it into a closet I have downstairs. And I took another thing and threw it out, you know. And so I'm starting to, because I don't know any like how this whole thing works. I'm just figuring it out as I go, and starting to see that in the present moment is the only time that, you know. Of course, you could plan something like cleaning up the garden or the house or whatever, but there's also now. And if I feel guilty about something, I'll check in. Why am I feel like? What am I feeling and why? Like, what is this guilt
Mm-hmm.
really about? Like in my case, that messiness was a guilt from my childhood because my mom was always very hyper strict. So it wasn't just about my house being out of zen. It was about a deeper emotion that I had felt, and I had touched in with that, and also realized that now that's not the reality. I'm a pretty organized and clean person, and if something's off, I clean it, and that's it. And I don't have to make a big stink about it and waiting for this one day to do a massive house cleaning that might never happen. But little by little, tackling the things that are present in me. You know?
It's that little by little concept that is at such at odds with a lot of our cultures. You know, the Russian culture that you described, I think, sounds a lot like the Puritan culture that showed up on the shores of the United States hundreds of years ago. You know, just incredible work ethic of, you know, your way of demonstrating service to God is by your hands on a plow. So just work, 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 work. And that coupled with, you know, the turn of the 20th century, the invention of marketing, and then all of a sudden there's this idea that you never have enough, never mind that you never are enough. And then you added to that cinema and all of this, you know, heroics of, you know, you got to be the best and have the best and all these things. It constantly feels like if you're not swinging the bat, hitting home runs every single time you step up to the plate, then you're failing. It makes it really hard to get started on this healing journey because it is inescapably a journey
Like
of a million trillion steps. There is no way to shortcut it. I don't care if you do 1,000 ayahuasca ceremonies. It doesn't matter.
no.
Well, first of all, there'd be 1,000 ceremonies. So that's not a little step anyway.
A friend of mine was boasting that he's like, no, like we do the hero's journey or the hero's dose where you take like 6 grams of mushrooms, and I'm like, buddy, you think that's gonna do it? Like,
Right.
benefits too if you need to reach a certain state of surrender and you haven't.
Yeah, it'll show you something. It'll
Yeah, but
But
then
that's not going to cure you. It's not a magic wand. It might break a veil that needs to be broken, but on the other side of that veil is all the decades of work left to be done.
let's dispel the myth right now, because it was dispelled to me, and I still sometimes ask about it. But I was asking Ronit, my friend and teacher, like, hey, this self-love thing that I'm working on, like, or this healing thing of my early childhood wounds with my father, how long does this take? If I work hard on it, if I maybe work half time in my business and really work on self-love, you think it's like, what, 2 years, 4 years? And she starts laughing. She's like, Ed, this is like climbing Mount Everest with your hands tied behind your back. This is a lifelong journey, and you're going to get different flavors of this healing or growth. And I keep thinking, like, it's like in order to, like, I can somehow do this and cure that or heal that or fix that. And that's the fixer in me, who always sees a problem solution. But yeah, if we humble ourselves to the fact that this is a lifelong journey, and also enjoy parts of the journey, because it's going to be like a roller coaster, hopefully a smoother one. But yeah, there are times where it's going to seem like you're all good and you're on top of the world and you're at peace and oneness with God and humanity. And there are times when you're going to feel like you're in the depth of darkness. And this journey is not for the faint of heart, and it's not easy. But what I do know is the further along it I go, yeah, like this week I shared with my group that this is the first time I'm truly feeling like deep levels of self-love. Like I'm starting to see myself, and made me cry the other day because somebody reflected back to me like how like powerful like a talk was. And afterwards I sat with myself and started to really feel and see that about myself. And I'm like, wow, there are, it's not a destination like self-love achieved, done,
Right.
next thing. But there are milestones of life just increasing in wonder and awe. And this week was one of them for me, where I just felt so alive, so in love with life and in wonder. And the tricky part is the more of that I feel and my cup becomes full with awe and happiness and bliss, I also started to feel deeper depth of sadness. Like, I don't have kids yet. I began to cry a bit when talking about children in the womb and how kids are getting like assaulted and verbally by parents. And that never used to make me cry. Definitely not the narcissist 10 years or 12 years ago. And I was like, am I feeling empathy for like a situation that I don't even have in my own life, like my own kids? And I felt really sad. And so I'm kind of understanding that this ride comes with that the more of this we feel, the more of that we're going to feel. And I'm okay with that, because it's to feel fully alive, as you were saying earlier, to live in all of the glory and mystery of this ride, that we're on. And
I think it's that yin yang concept. I don't think you can have more of one without the other. And if you don't open readily for the other to show up and allow it to be beautiful, like you were describing, right? Which is how I consider feeling sad about things, because it's like, that is beautiful, because that's the human condition.
Yeah.
But if you don't open up for it, it hits you like a bus in other ways. Instead of sadness, it will be tragedy or, deep depression, clinical depression, anxiety, crippling anxiety.
Yeah,
Because you can't hide from
I do know that if I don't, when I try to fight it, when I try to numb it, when I try to suppress it, when I just go on a trip to put it all behind me, it just comes back to bite you harder and harder. And if you're not feeling the bite, then it adds up and it's going to bite you in a big way. Like when my whole thing collapsed and I hit rock bottom, I was ignoring it, man. I was using spiritual bypassing and like, we're building the future, and my life was fucking falling apart while I'm building it till it all collapsed. And that's why I wouldn't change it for the world, because it helped me see, what can be built from those ashes.
There's something kind of poetic about people who end up on a spiritual path who become teachers.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of examples in Netflix documentaries to support it, where, people they figured something out. They did crack a code, right? Like they saw deeply somehow through some gift, wow, all these different pieces fit together. And if you do this, you can unlock all these things. And people are deeply attracted to that.
Yeah.
what's really fascinating is it seems like it's built into the game that the more of that you elucidate really quickly, especially, the more likely it is for you to completely ignore your own shadow. And that shadow will just come out from nowhere
Mm-hmm.
and ravage your life. So let's say you're a tantric master or a yoga retreat center owner. And maybe you grew up and you were unattractive and, never really had a sexual history of any significance. And then all of a sudden you're in your 50s and you're surrounded by the most beautiful women in the world just throwing themselves at you. And all of a sudden this monster comes up from out of nowhere that you have no control over because you didn't attend it your whole life. Your shadow just sat there growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
So one of the things I find really fascinating about this journey is that no matter who you are, no matter how much you learn, no matter how much you grow, no matter how much you let go, no matter how much you heal, you cannot stop attending to the 360-degree reality of who you are and who you're forgetting still needs to be healed. Because if for one moment you suddenly, and this is why it's such a cosmic dance and it's almost comical, because as soon as you start to self-love and heal, there's a proclivity to over self-love, right? And it's just like, I'm doing pretty fucking good, aren't I? I'm really something now.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's just like, oh shoot, I'm like puffing up my ego over here.
Yeah.
And so it's just this continuous awareness, but that is what makes it a dance. And I think that if we can look at it with curiosity, to your point before, and play, it can just be fun. I'll give you an example. My wife and I have opposite love languages.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is physical touch. Hers is acts of service. And we'll get into a cycle where my being becomes frustrated that she is not, showing affection to me. And then I will end up distancing myself from her. And that will end up making her feel betrayed, which is like a trigger of hers. And then so she further distances herself from me, which further alienates physical touch. And you end up in this crazy ass cycle. And then once I see it happening, I'll laugh out loud.
Yeah.
I'll be like, we are a perfect union. We were literally brought together to heal each other because we have the exact opposite needs. And only through the courage of one of us noticing it and saying, okay, I'm going to de-armor myself completely and go compassionately approach the other person, can we actually, get past that. And we were together for a very, very long time. We were in therapy, couples therapy, for over a decade. And all of that work was just survival work so that we didn't explode. But the healing stuff didn't really start happening until, we could start to take off that armor around the heart and show up and be real.
Yeah.
But again, my point of saying all that is it's all rooted in play. It's all rooted in a lack of terror that you're going to be annihilated and just showing up and just dancing with the music, baby.
I love that. I feel like that is the closing note, actually. Just dancing with the music. And what a good example to elucidate taking off the armor and really growing with another person as mirrors, Yeah, I think if we took off more of our armor, not just between relationships and husband and wife or girlfriend and boyfriend, but as a society, and started to play together as kids did, and curiosity and wonder, I think we would feel more connected and less alone, that we're all in this sandbox together.
That's right.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's a beautiful place to end, my friend.
Yeah, in modeling truth and transparency, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to tell Matt that I feel like we're reaching an organic close. My body was feeling already pretty good. I was also wondering oh, if someone's listening to this, they might be feeling the same. And then I was like, no, you can't say that on a podcast. You can't say, I feel like I think we're reaching an end, God forbid. But this was such a delightful conversation to play with you, Matt, and be curious together.
Same here. I'm really glad that I reached out and asked. Yeah, this has been wonderful. And I hope that I get to make it down to Costa Rica and meet you in your native homeland now.
Yeah.
And if not, I'm definitely coming down to see that museum when it opens. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, for sure. I hope we can share on the podcast the link to Leap Forward, because it's a great tool. And I'll share the link to my website too for those who are interested in taking a leap into alternative ways of living. But yeah, just beautiful to share a bit with you and with those listening.
Well, thanks so much, my friend. Until next time.
Cheers, brother.